Hi folks, welcome back to American Lit 1. We were talking about Nathaniel Hawthorne, and we give you a little background on him. He was born on the 4th of July in 1804, a very American author. His ancestors were Puritans. 5 generations prior, the original family name was Hathorne. However, it was changed to Hawthorne due to their shame and embarrassment over one of their relatives' works and deeds in the Salem witch trials. One of them was a judge and condemned a lot of people to die for the sin of witchcraft. Turned out that, of course, this was mostly based on corruption and scandal, and that the devil was, in fact, not present, at least in the way that everyone deemed he was. And it was a lot more subtle, shall we say. He attended Bowdoin College from 1821 to 1825. His professors remembered him as an idle student, but always reading. Imagine that. He became friends with the American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and Franklin Pierce, future President of the United States. His publication life, his first novel, Fanshawe, sorry, I can't read my own writing, came out in 1828. Apparently it was so bad that it was recalled and almost completely destroyed. Well, from humble beginnings, right? Apparently, he came out with a gift book called The Token, published in 1832, and included his tale, The Gentle Boy. A collection of his stories was reprinted in a book called Twice Told Tales in 1837. The next few stories we're going to be talking about will have been drawn from there. And enlarged in 1842, but only a few critics, Poe included, understood what he was actually doing. Let's see. Mosses from Old Mats followed up in 1846, published serially as a book. In 1850, he wrote The Scarlet Letter, the book that made him famous. Following that with The Snow Image, 1851, The House of Seven Gables, 1851 as well, The Blithedale Romance, 1852, The Wonder Book, 1852, and The Tanglewood Tales in 1853. In 1852, he wrote The Life of Franklin Pierce. This got him a government job as the U.S. Consul in Liverpool, England. All right, so the tale we're going to be discussing today is Young Goodman Brown. It's an allegory, and what that means is it is a story that, a story within a story. It is a story that tells, beneath its surface, something a little more, how do I put it? What an allegory does is it tells a tale, tells you a lesson within the story itself, okay? And the characters' names all mean something else. The events are meant to tell us something else, deeper than what is on the page and what is on the surface. For example, the characters' names are packed with meaning. We have Goodman Brown, okay? It works on 2 levels. It is a name that pilgrims would refer to each other, the Puritans would refer to each other by as Goodman and Goodwife, you know. But it also tells us that he's a good man, right? And this is perhaps where his trouble springs from. And his wife's name is Faith. I'm just going to let that one lie for a second there. Yeah, we have Faith. Faith, Faith, Faith. All right, she is his faith, his wife, but also his faith. So when he sets out on his trip to the woods, he leaves his faith behind. Here's a portrait of our author, Nathaniel Hawthorne. And here is a depiction of young Goodman Brown's trip to the woods. Now he sets off on a journey away from the Christian community and the noble community into the woods, which represent the unknown. Typically, communities in just about every story represent the known, the safe, the understood. In westerns, people are going out into the Badlands. You have the people in the town. You know, that's society out on the plains there, out on the edge of the frontier. And out there beyond the confines of the town, you have the outlaws. The outlaws are always riding in from out of town, right? So you have the knowable community, the place that you feel safe and secure. And then you have the unknowable community, the forest, the wilderness, where where trouble can occur. So he suggests that the devil might be waiting in his thoughts, and suddenly the devil appears, or at least an old man does. But we know that because of what the old man knows and what he says, this old man is a representative. He is the devil. And he chides him for being late. Young Goodman Brown says, unsurprisingly, my faith kept me back a while. All right. So what does that tell us? The devil says, well, you're late. He says, well, my faith kept me away for a while. Right. This is a good man leaving his moorings, his moral restraints, and heading out into the unknown where anything can happen. Yeah. So my faith kept me back for a while. It was my faith that kept me from sinning, so here I am. And the old man's staff seems to be made of wriggling snakes. And the first appearance of the devil in the Bible was as a serpent when he tempted Eve in the Garden of Eden. The old man compels him to go further with him. Young Goodman Brown says no, that he won't, and that his forefathers never did. Right. Now notice, too, that the old man looks surprisingly like an older version of young Goodman Brown. Christians are told, and in the Bible it tells us that we are made in God's image. So it's perhaps only fitting that the devil would look like young Goodman Brown, right? Yes. Why does he look like young Goodman Brown? Well, young Goodman Brown his faith is going to be tested, right? His goodness, his religious fervor, and all that is going to be put to the test here, and in order to gain his trust, of course, the devil would look like him. So the old man gives young Goodman Brown a litany of his ancestors' dirty deeds. He goes on listing all these things, including one who had beat a Quaker woman through the streets, or one who had committed murder during King Philip's War, which was a war between the settlers and the Indians. Young Goodman Brown says he's surprised. He never heard of these family legends, or rather, he's not surprised, as such would have gotten him run out of New England. Okay. He protests that they're people of prayer and not wickedness. Right. Now, one of the things that Hawthorne was interested in, and one of the stories he was interested in telling, were stories involving hypocrisy. He wanted to reveal people's, well, if not their evil nature, he wanted to show them, to expose hypocrisy. And particularly those who were holier than thou, and seem not to understand that we all have our shortcomings. Right? And such is the case in this story here. The devil says he's acquainted with many good church leaders with whom he has regular association. Right? It was, oh, well, you worried about this, you worried about these good people. I'm actually associated with a number of good church-going folks. They're some of my best friends. And they come to a woman that he knows named Goody Cloyce, traveling in the woods, and she was his Sunday school teacher. Imagine, if you will, going down Bourbon Street in New Orleans, Louisiana, and you see your Sunday school teacher come stumbling out of a bar. Yeah, it's kind of the same effect here. Or you see someone that you interact with and you respect them, thinking of someone as having a great deal of virtue, and you see something that they post on social media that just shocks you. Yeah. Does this make them bad people? Well, the quick and dirty answer among many people is, oh, yes, it absolutely does. But actually, no. The problem is we are all human. We all have these shortcomings. We have these failures. Even the most pious of us have our own issues. And that's what's at work here in this story. Anyway, he runs into his old school teacher, or his Sunday school teacher, traveling in the woods, and he's ashamed to be seen with her, right? The old joke about how Baptists don't recognize each other at the liquor store. It's that kind of thing. So he sees her and he's like, oh, I'm ashamed to see her, for her to see me walking with the devil. I'm going to hide. And so he hides back in the bushes. And the old man says, okay, that's fine. Just get over there. That's fine. Goody Cloyce knows the devil right away. Right? And young Goodman looks on in horror as they begin to talk about witchcraft and evil. Yeah. So he says, that old woman taught me my catechism. And there was a world of meaning in that simple comment there Hawthorne says. And what is that meaning? Yeah, well, that woman taught me all I know about the Holy Scriptures and taught me the words of catechism, the words of religious ceremony. And here she is consorting with the devil. Makes him question his faith. Wouldn't you? Absolutely. Yes. Okay. So no sooner did the devil left him, and he said, you go on ahead, than a horseman came down the road talking about the black baptism that is to come later on that night. One says he'd miss a church function for one of these black masses. You know, I commonly joke that down here in the South, football is kind of like, football is about the same as religion, but people miss church to see the football game. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. He says, you know, I like these things so much. I enjoy these black baptisms so much. I would miss church to be here. The ordination dinner that he talks about, that they mention, is more or less the equivalent, or the equivalent, but the opposite to what they're going to. Young Goodman Brown hears them say that a good young woman is being inducted that night. Newsflash. If there's only one other young woman mentioned by name in the story, chances are that's who's going to be inducted. Right? And who do we know thus far from the story? Who have we been told about but Faith? Young Goodman Brown hears this. He claims that he will resist the devil with faith and heaven traveling through the woods. And then he hears the voice of his wife moaning. No, keep in mind here, this is a story about a man in struggle with himself, right? There are the tensions and the mores here. He has his faith, he has what he believes, what he knows to be right and good and just, and yet he is tempted away. Yeah. You could be, there's an old saying that the devil will find whatever weakness you have and he will play on it, right? If you are a good church-going person, if you're a person of faith, that you donate to charity, that you give your time to the Lord, but you have a little trouble with greed. And then all at once, suddenly there's this easy money. Yeah. You find an opportunity to gain some money pretty quickly, but the ethics are a little bit fuzzy. Maybe insider trading, or who knows? Fill in the blank. And so you find yourself tempted by it, and that's kind of what's going on with young Goodman Brown here. He's a good man, right? We know this because he is called Good Man, right? And that's how allegory works. He's an allegorical character. This kind of works on the level that morality plays used to. It'd be a character named Faith, or Good Character, or Temperance, being tempted away to the world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, at least on Elizabethan or early English version thereof, and has to be restored by Faith or some other character that was represented in that story. So essentially, this is kind of Young Goodman Brown is kind of a morality tale from the morality plays of early theater in England. That's kind of how it's meant to work on some level. But he says, look, I hear all this coming. I hear all this trouble, all this evil, but I'm going to resist. I'm going to resist with my faith and with the power of heaven. Okay. So then he hears his wife moaning, and the forest seems to mock him for crying, "Faith, Faith." He sees a pink ribbon from the first page of the story, which Faith was wearing come floating down. And at this point, Goodman Brown turns his back on the world, abandons it for lost, having lost his faith. He goes, if I don't have my faith, what's the use? What's the point? He arrives at the gathering only to find several prominent citizens, friends and neighbors, good people, people he would see at the church building on Sunday morning, at Sunday school, staying for service, even come back to the evening service and Wednesday night Bible study. Right? And among the crowd, he cannot find faith, giving us a sense that perhaps not everybody has turned to evil. Well, okay, at least my faith is not here. At least there is a holdout. At least she maintains her faith. When the devil beckons, young Goodman Brown moves toward the circle, feeling a kinship with those gathered, because suddenly he recognizes his own evil, and a kinship with theirs. The veiled female is brought forth, and the devil tells all these folk, you thought you were better than me, but they were all with me. And he tells young Goodman Brown, you thought all these folks were better than me, but you're all here with me, and maybe to the crowd themselves. And they expose all the sins that they've committed. Young Goodman Brown and Faith, now unveiled, face each other. A man, and this is in this scene here, they're looking at each other across the altar, in front of the altar. So literally what you have is a man examining his faith, looking to his faith, right? Yeah. This is not a story about a guy going into the woods. This is a story about a man wrestling with sin and wrestling with his own insecurities and his nature. At the last moment, he cries out to Faith to resist, and the scene changes. And suddenly, young Goodman Brown's all by himself there in the forest. There's the remains of the fire, but everything else is gone. All the gathered parties have disappeared. And so, the night having passed, he sets off for home, like you do. In the village where he returns, young Goodman Brown, however, is forever changed. His wife comes up to him, and he can't look at her the same way. He distrusts his neighbors and his friends because he remembers the black baptism and granted them the power of evil. He even ignores his wife when she rushes to greet him. When he dies, it's from a life of gloom here. Of the story, Herman Melville, the author and critic, said the story is as deep as Dante, who wrote Dante's Inferno. This is a story of a man struggling with his faith. He goes into the wild, or perhaps the world outside the church, or the world outside of his community, to test his faith. Hawthorne's story is prosecution of religion, particularly the Puritans, who are pious in public, but in private they live a very different life. Young Goodman Brown can't accept the wickedness of other people, and perhaps he had no real faith at all. That's why he fell so quickly, right? And why he was so torn by all these people. That perhaps it kind of begs the question: if he had true faith, if he knew the difference between good and evil, and was so unassailably good, how come he could be tempted away and drawn out into the woods to where evil took place? Right? Now here's the thing. I think that it's left ambiguous. And the reading here, I think, for us is that at least one good reading could be made that this was all illusion, that young Goodman Brown was struggling within himself, and the entire journey was not actually physical. The people weren't really there. He went into the woods, but the people and the events that he saw there were just tricks of the devil. That these good men and women were not in place there. But he began to see them as different. He couldn't accept his own flaws, his own wickedness, and his own issues here. And so he began to look at them and judge them for their hypocrisy. Because it's easier for him to believe that they had lost their faith than to accept that he had perhaps lost his, or maybe his wasn't as strong as he thought it was. And so that's why he was gloomy for the rest of his life. He thought on some level that perhaps all of this is falsehood, all of this is a mockery, that there's no real faith here, and that what I believed was all falsehood. All these people are just phonies. When, in fact, he was the one with the issue. So, again, Nathaniel Hawthorne, interested in writing about people who are engaged in hypocrisy, whose actions and deeds in private do not line up with what they profess to be. He's looking at exposing that here. And it's a young Goodman Brown is an ideal story for doing that. Okay, so the next couple of stories are of a different tack. They are, let's see how we say, early American science fiction, and they're quite well wrought. So I hope you look forward to reading those, and I'll see you in the next video.